So in our last video, we just saw examples of our three different data categories that we've been talking about in Excel. And as a reminder, these categories are text, numbers, and formulas. Within each of these categories, there are several different data types, and this is especially the case when we're talking about numbers. As you know, numbers can represent a whole bunch of different things. Numbers may be currency, like US dollars. Numbers might be times and dates. Numbers might be percentages or fractions. And so there's a possibility that even when we're entering in data in one of our categories, we may have confusion about what those numbers represent. In this video, what we're going to be talking about is we'll preview a few of these different data types, and we'll learn how to understand how Excel is interpreting these data types so that we know whatever data we're putting into a spreadsheet, we're thinking about it the same way Excel is and vice versa. This is a very important topic. We want to make sure that Excel is thinking about our data the same way that we are. And I'll give you a little example here to show how important this is. So if we just go into a blank Excel sheet and let's say we're interested in entering in a fraction. And so we type in 1/2. We can already start thinking about the different ways that Excel may view this data, this number, and what it might do with it. And so we're thinking of this as a fraction, 1/2. Is Excel thinking of it as a fraction? Or is it maybe thinking of it as a date? It might be January 2nd, it might be February 1st, depending on where we live and how we write our dates. We can even imagine that because we've been working with formulas and equations, Excel might actually calculate this value out and give us a value of 1/2, 0.5 as a decimal, right? So there are lots of possibilities for confusion here. So let's just see what Excel does when we enter in this value of 1/2. Now we see the whole point of this video. When we typed in a fraction, Excel immediately interpreted this in some kind of date format. What this is this is an issue of cell formatting. We can resolve this issue through cell formatting, and by using cell formatting, we can help avoid these kinds of miscommunications. You can see that this can be a very important source of errors in Excel if we think data represents something else than how Excel is interpreting it. So in this video, we're going to learn how to identify and avoid this problem, and this is going to save us a lot of trouble in the long run. So as we explore cell formatting, we're going to start with a very simple spreadsheet here, and we'll start with a review of our three different data categories and see how they work with data we've been working with, and then we'll move on to the situations where we're more likely to have errors, and we'll find out how to fix and avoid those errors. So we've been dealing with temperature data. You saw that that's going to be one of the projects we're working on, and one of the text categories that we can talk about is we have months associated with temperature data. And so we'll just start out with the month of January here. I'll make sure I spell it properly. And then I'll give you another example where text doesn't have to be a single word. It might be notes, it might be a sentence. We might have addresses, for example, or just some kind of note. I'm going to say, my name is Kevin. And what we see is this is formatted as text. Perfect. Nothing strange going on here. We can also add in numbers. We've been dealing with temperatures, and you may recall that the high daily temperature on average for the month of January where I live is about 51 degrees Fahrenheit, and the low temperature is about 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So I can enter those numbers in as well. One thing you'll notice immediately, and this is part of how Excel is doing its self-formatting, is it's telling us that it's seeing different things in these data. It's justifying text data to the left. You see that January is on the left-hand side of that cell. And it's justifying or aligning numerical data, number data, to the right. So Excel is sending us signals here about how it's interpreting these values. And this is important for us to catch on to, because this is how we communicate with Excel and Excel communicates with us. But right now everything is great. It sees our text as text. It sees our numbers as numbers. Remember that we can also do formulas. We start formulas with an equal sign, and maybe we just want to calculate the difference again between this high and low temperature in January, 51 minus 30. So we have a formula here, but when we enter that in, what we see is we get the result. We get that numerical value justified to the right. And so Excel is telling us, hey, here's the answer. It's a number, and so I'm putting that on the right-hand side of the cell. We can also take advantage of cell referencing, and we can do the same thing where we subtract the value in C3 from the value in B3, and we get the same result. These are numbers. The answer is a number. The underlying data is a formula, however, and we can always look up into this formula bar to see what that formula is. But if the result of the formula of the equation is a number, we'll have those data presented to us as a number. All of this is a feature of Excel's general cell formatting. So let's quickly explore what the cell format of these cells is. We'll click on one of these cells, we'll click on January, we will right-click, and now we'll go down to Format Cells. This is going to give us a menu telling us how that cell is formatted. Right now it's formatted in the general cell format. No specific number format, and as you can see, it handles text just fine. We can also look in this number here, also the general format, and so we just learned that the general format handles numbers and it handles text. That's great. What about with formulas? Let's click on this cell again, right-click, Format Cells. Again, we see this is a general format cell. So the general format in Excel is the default cell format, and it can handle text, it can handle numbers, and it can handle formulas like we've been dealing with. This is great. You can see we have a bunch of other cell formats here, and this is where cell formatting can become really important and where it can lead to and help us avoid errors in our spreadsheets. So let's explore in a little more detail this issue of cell formatting. So as we saw in the introduction to this video, it's dates where things can get more complicated. So let's work with some dates here. And I'll start just by entering in a typical date formats of January 1st, 2021. And we'll see that Excel recognizes this as a date, it pushes it to the right as if it's a number, and it does a little bit of formatting there. It actually changed how the date looked. I entered in 1/1, and it changed it to 01/01. And that's because Excel is doing some formatting here. And so we'll go back to our Format Cells menu, and Excel has identified that I entered in a date, and it used this default date format that I have set on Excel. But you see we have numerous other date formats we can choose. We can even have Excel calculate the day of the week for us, which is really pretty cool. We change that and we find out, or we're reminded that January 1st this year was a Friday. That's really cool. But the critical thing is now that this cell is formatted as a date, it's going to stay as a date. That's really critical to understand here. So if I delete this, the date is gone, but the cell is still formatted as a date. So if I enter in another number, say the number 23, Excel converts that to a date. This is a huge and important source of errors in Excel, and it's because of this cell formatting. Once Excel changes a cell's formats to one kind, like date, it's going to stay that way unless we change it back. So if we actually want this cell to be a number, we need to make sure it's in the general or number format. We'll go with the general format, the default. Now I can enter in 23, and it will stay as a number 23. But since we're working here with dates, I'm going to convert that back to the date. And there we have it. I'll go back to having the day of the week in there, right-click, down to Format Cells, and then we can adjust how we want things to look. Beautiful. And remember, even when we input the fraction 1/2, Excel interpreted that as a date. January 2nd, it looks like it's saying here. So what do we do if we actually want a fraction to be a fraction? Well, that's another job for cell formatting. And so let's go here to our other area of the Excel spreadsheet where we're going to be dealing with fractions. Here we will preemptively change the cell format to make sure that it's going to reflect what we want it to. In this case, it's going to reflect fractions. We'll go down to Format Cells. We will choose that we want it to be a fraction. We'll be fine with 1 digit. We don't need 2 digits or 3 digits for this fraction because we're just going to do 1/2. Beautiful. Keeps it as a fraction. Doesn't calculate it as a proportion. Doesn't convert it into a date because we said we wanted that to be a fraction. Now, if we do want Excel to calculate that as a proportion, right, 1/2 being 0.5, of course, we can just tell Excel to do it as a formula. And here we'll see it calculates that as 0.5 because it's always going to output the results of formulas as numerical values, as decimals as opposed to fractions. So hopefully this is starting to make sense that there are certain data types where Excel is going to say, aha, I'm going to assume this is a date and put it into a date. We can fix and change that using cell formatting. And then there are other times, like for fractions, we want to change cell formatting to make sure it reflects the kind of data we're inputting. A final example of this is with currency. Maybe we want this number to not just reflect a number. Maybe we want that number to reflect a value of currency. And so again, this is a job for cell formatting. Right-click, format cells. This time we'll select currency. This is very common in a lot of spreadsheet applications where we're dealing with dollars and cents. In this case, we'll deal with US dollars, but you can see we have a whole bunch of different currencies to choose from. We'll keep 2 decimal places because that makes sense for many currencies where we have cents in dollars or other smaller fractions of currencies. And once we convert that, boom, now it looks like a currency. Again, this is really fantastic because it makes explicitly clear what the data are that we're working with. It's not just a number, this is currency. So there's some critical information for you on cell formatting. Maybe the most important thing to remember is that for some types of data, Excel is going to convert the cell formatting for you. This happens most frequently with dates, and if you don't want that to happen, then the solution is to go into your right-click menu, choose Format Cells, and change that cell formatting to be how you want it to be. Understanding this is really critical to successfully having a spreadsheet that doesn't have errors in it. Again, this is a very common source of errors, and I'm hopeful that this information will help you avoid some of the frustrations and errors that come along with learning Excel. And now you'll have the opportunity to practice some of these skills dealing with cell formatting.